For the longest time, we thought we had this story all figured out. The story of humanity's greatest explorers, the very first people to conquer the massive Pacific Ocean. But then, a discovery, buried for millennia under the sands of a remote island chain, just shattered everything we thought we knew. This is the story of a voyage so incredibly daring, so audacious, it forced us to literally rewrite human history. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to treat this like a real detective story. First, we'll look at the legend everyone believed. Then, the impossible discovery that blew it all apart. We'll explore the insane voyage itself, uncover the archaeological smoking gun, look at some of the weird riddles they left behind, and finally, see how this one event changes the entire human story. All right, so for a very long time, the history books told a really clear story about who first conquered the open Pacific. It was this fantastic tale of a remarkable people who, bit by bit, pushed the boundaries of the known world. So let's just start with that big question. If you'd asked any archaeologist this, say 30 years ago, you would have gotten a really confident, really specific answer. But that answer, as we're about to find out, was missing a crucial and much, much earlier first chapter. The answer was the Lapita, and for good reason. These folks were the undisputed champions of ancient seafaring. Their legacy is literally etched into these gorgeous, intricately designed pieces of pottery that we find scattered across thousands of miles of ocean. They were seen as the absolute pioneers, the ones who finally broke through into what's called remote Oceania. And that's the really vast, empty part of the Pacific, where islands are just tiny specks in a sea of blue. So this was the textbook theory, the out-of-Taiwan model. And you can see it makes a lot of sense. It shows this logical, step-by-step expansion over thousands of years. Starts around 3500 BC in Taiwan, people move south into the Philippines, then kind of slowly edge their way east, and finally, around 1100 BC, the Lapita are thought to have made that first huge jump into remote Oceania. It was a neat story, it was tidy, and as it turns out, it was missing the beginning. Okay, so this is where our detective story really kicks into gear. Because sometimes in science, the most important finds are the ones that just don't fit, the anomalies. And out in the Mariana Islands, archaeologists found the ultimate anomaly. So here it is, the heart of the problem. The accepted timeline said remote Oceania was settled around 1100 BC. That was the rule. But the dating that came back from the Marianas was shocking. Around 1500 BC. Let that sink in. That's 400 years earlier. People were living out on these remote islands for 4 full centuries before the so-called first explorers even got there. It didn't compute. And look, this wasn't some fluke or single bad date. Site after site, places like Retidian on Guam, Unai Bapot on Saipan, they all confirmed the timeline. And the scientists were incredibly careful. They didn't just test bits of charcoal. They used high-precision radiocarbon dating on short-lived marine shells, even on the surrounding sediment, just to be absolutely sure. The science was rock solid. People had somehow crossed a huge expanse of empty ocean and set up shop here, way before anyone thought was humanly possible. So, if the date itself was unbelievable, the journey was almost unthinkable. This discovery didn't just tack on an earlier chapter to the story, it described a feat of seafaring that just dwarfed what came after. This was a true leap into the unknown. I want you to just stare at that number for a second. 2,300 kilometers. That's the distance from the Philippines to the Marianas. To put that in perspective, that's like sailing from Los Angeles almost to Chicago, but over nothing but open, empty ocean. No landmarks, no rest stops, nothing. At that time, it was the single longest sea crossing ever successfully attempted in all of human history. Researchers call this a blue desert, and this map really shows you why. I mean, look at it. There is just nothing in between. They would have used these incredible outrigger canoes, basically survival pods packed with everything they needed. And they navigated by reading the stars, the sun, the ocean swells, this brilliant, complex technique we now call wayfinding. They were literally reading the ocean itself as their map. And the dangers were just terrifying. I mean, think about it. Later Polynesian voyages often involved island hopping, where if you missed one island, you might get lucky and hit another one. Out here, there was no safety net. You miss that tiny little arc of the Marianas by even a single degree, and you sail off into the empty North Pacific forever. And to make it even harder, they had to sail against the prevailing trade winds, a brutal, grinding upwind journey, which meant that at a certain point, there was no turning back. This was a one-way trip, a total commitment to finding land or dying in the attempt. So the big question is,
were these incredible sailors? Where on earth did they come from? For years, that was the mystery. And the answer didn't come from a legend. It came out of the dirt, in the form of the archaeological smoking gun, a piece of pottery. Okay, so let's get into the details because this is fascinating. The key piece of evidence is this very specific style of pottery called Mariana's redware. The tech behind it is just amazing. That vibrant red color, it comes from a liquid clay slip that's loaded with hematite or iron oxide. They'd cover the pot in it, then burnish it with a smooth stone until it shone. The walls are paper thin so they wouldn't crack in an open fire. And see those designs? They were stamped on with these tiny tooth-like tools and then filled with a white paste made from coral lime to make the patterns really pop. This isn't just a bowl, it's a piece of advanced technology with a very distinct technical fingerprint. And that fingerprint is what led archaeologists straight to a site called Nagsabaran in the northern Philippines. Just look at this. On the left, you have pottery from the Philippines. On the right, pottery from the Marianas, 2,300 kilometers away. It's not just similar. The style, the clay recipe, those intricate stamped patterns, it is an identical match. It's like finding matching DNA. This is the undeniable proof. The first potters in the Marianas were using the exact same cultural recipe as their relatives back in the Philippines. And the proof doesn't stop with the pottery, which is amazing enough. The language tells the exact same story. You see, the indigenous Chamorro language that's spoken in the Marianas today belongs to the Western Malayo-Polynesian language group. Its family tree, its roots, its core vocabulary, it traces directly back to the Philippines, perfectly mirroring that archaeological trail of red pottery. It's a perfect match. But you know how it is in science. Solving one giant mystery just opens up a bunch of new ones. And this discovery left behind some absolutely fascinating questions, little riddles buried in the sand for us to puzzle over today. And this has to be one of the strangest puzzles of all. We know for a fact these settlers were planning to stay. They brought the foundations of their entire agricultural system with them. But there was something really important missing from their canoes. Get this, we have impressions of rice husks baked right into the pottery, which proves they brought cultivated rice with them, along with other essential crops. But the animals? Pigs, dogs, chickens, all were domesticated and available back in the Philippines at that time. But we find no evidence of them in the earliest Mariana settlements. None. So why? Was the journey just too long and too risky for livestock? Or in a sprint for survival were they just not a priority? We still don't really know. And another reason this whole story stayed hidden for so long is, well, geology. 3,500 years ago, the sea level was about 2 meters higher than it is today. So that means the original beaches, the exact spots where these pioneers first landed, are now way inland, buried under tons and tons of sand. Archaeologists actually had to become geologists, figuring out where these ghost coastlines were so they could know where to dig to find the evidence that had been waiting for us all this time. So, let's pull back. What does all of this actually mean? Why does this one ancient voyage matter so much? Well, it's because it doesn't just add a little detail to our history. It fundamentally changes the entire narrative of human exploration. This chart just says it all, doesn't it? That first bar, the Mariana voyage at 1500 BC, it stands completely alone. For centuries after they arrived, no one else even attempted a voyage on this scale. The famous Lapita expansion didn't even kick off for another 400 years. So this wasn't just the first step into remote Oceania, it was a giant leap that no one else would or could repeat for almost half a millennium. And this single sentence from the research really sums it all up. This wasn't just another migration, this was a singular event, a record-breaking achievement that pushed the absolute limits of what was possible for human technology, courage, and navigational genius in the ancient world. So what this all comes down to is this. The ancestors of the modern Chamorro people of the Marianas weren't just following a path someone else had made. They were blazing a trail into a completely unknown world. They were, for all intents and purposes, the deep ocean astronauts of their age. And this discovery has given their descendants today a profound new origin story, a legacy not just of being settlers, but of being the direct descendants of the most daring, most brilliant pioneering voyagers the world had ever seen.